All right, so good morning, everyone. I mean, y'all act like I didn't fly from New York to come here. Talking about good morning. Come on now. All right, so good morning, everybody. That's more like it. You guys, we've got a really interesting discussion here. I'm so honored to be able to introduce someone who really needs no introduction, Dr. Mo Ibrahim. Let's give it up. I'm going to keep it short because we have a lot to talk about, and this session is really about, in some senses, advice for our generation from those who've come before. But Dr. Mo Ibrahim, obviously the founder of CellTel, very big in telecommunications, PhD in mobile communications, as you all know, but really we all know him for his leadership and governance, for the Mo Ibrahim Foundation and the prize that's awarded maybe not every year, but in years when we have really good African leaders who transition out of power and make it possible for the younger ones to come up. So why don't we give a round of applause to Dr. Mo Ibrahim for leadership in that sense. And then I'm going to call you Mo. I hope that's cool. I got to make sure that I respect the elders. But let's talk a little bit. Let's just get right into it. I think what we want to really talk about and what everybody's here to talk about is leadership, but for us, really ethical leadership, the kind of leadership that in some senses you have said has been lacking on the continent. So why don't we start with the very basics and say, what is ethical leadership in your opinion?
I don't know about the term ethical.
Okay, all right, see? Told you I was going to be controversial.
Yes. No, we need to question everything, I suppose, yes. Leadership. Leadership is very important in really taking people forward. And our problem with leadership is that if you look at the history of Africa, we really had a bad history in Africa. I mean, we go back, we had slavery, huge crime. Followed that, we had colonization. Then we had our independence about 50 or 60. I know South Africa here had its independence much later. But most of Africa gained their independence around the 50s and 60s, actually. So it was over 50 years ago. Now, what happened? What have we done with our independence when we assumed responsibility for our countries and our people? I argue always that we had a major failure in leadership. Our leaders who assumed power in the 60s or whatever totally failed in developing our resources, whether it is natural resources or human resources. Actually, we ended up with a class of kleptocrats, dictators, thieves, criminals in most of the continent. It is a sad fact. It is a sad fact. And we always had that narrative that everything goes wrong here is because somebody somewhere else. It's not us, because it's those guys, bad guys across the water. No, it is us. We are responsible for this. We are responsible for the great theft of our resources, of the failure to develop our human being. Look at the map. Africa is a huge place, huge continent. African people are only 1.1 billion people. Yeah? That is much less than India, much less than China. You can take China, put it in Africa, you can take India, put it in Africa, you can put Europe, you can put United States, and you have more space. We are a huge continent. No, it's true. That's true. So this continent is very much underpopulated. And yet, you see people running away from Africa, dying in the Mediterranean, famines, hunger, civil wars, etc. You guys are crazy? What's going on? Why, if we have all these resources, and we have the gift of this wonderful continent, why we have failed to develop our resources for the benefit of our people.
So let me
And the
jump
answer
in.
is leadership, whether you call it ethical leadership or not. I call it crazy leadership,
Yeah.
which really ended up in this disaster for Africa. That's why we need governance and leadership to take this continent forward. That's prerequisite. It's not aid. It's not.
So let me take a step back because
Yeah.
you've said a lot. That's a lot to discuss. But we'll step back because I know you have very strong opinions about the relationship of say whether it's slavery or colonialism or the post-colonial period immediately to what we're seeing now. And, you've spoken a lot about this idea of taking responsibility for actions. But before we get into that, I mean, let's talk a little bit, let's unpack this idea of the impacts of colonialism, say the impacts of the Cold War, which I know you've spoken about. Can we really actually say that we are the only ones who are responsible for our condition right now?
Absolutely.
You think so?
Absolutely. Look,
So let me just to go back. So that all of that extraction, all movement of bodies from Africa to the West, the removal of resources, that has no bearing on where we are right now.
no, because we let them do that. You lie back and let people come and rape you, and you say, I'm not responsible? Of course you are responsible.
Well,
But why we let people come and rape us? Why? It's our responsibility.
So I
it's
might
not
disagree
enough
with
to
the
say,
term,
oh,
but-
those people are not kind. Those people coming and stealing our wealth. Why you let them steal your wealth? Excuse me. Wake up. So it's, look, our responsibility is there. And the world is a jungle. And nobody is responsible for your own well-being. Yeah, you are responsible for your own well-being. So to sit back and say, oh, let the Americans come and look after us, let the Chinese come and look after us. Excuse me, what is this? This is sick.
I mean, I don't disagree that responsibility is important, but I maybe disagree a little bit that we are entirely responsible for conditions that maybe we didn't create.
Look, if we accepted that this is not a paradise, this world we live in, we have different nations, we have different interests, and everybody is looking after themselves. Of course, slavery is a terrible crime, and other people committed it, not us. Okay? Unfortunately, we failed to fight back there. We were weaker. We didn't have arms. We didn't have bullets. Okay? So that's a really sad event. And the people who claim to be good Christians came and did this crime. It's terrible. Colonialism is bad. There's no question about that. But it's our responsibility to liberate ourselves. And we had our liberation movements, etc. People fought back and managed to get their independence. Then what are you doing with your independence now? Independence is not a colorful flag, a beautiful national anthem, and a nice dance. That is not independence. Independence, to take a charge of your countries and move it forward. That is independence.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's what we need to do.
I would agree. So let's take it back a little bit. So you were born in 1947, right? 1946. Okay, sorry. I was trying to make you a little bit younger, but hey. Okay, well, why don't we go for 76 then? So 1946 in Sudan. And then you grew up in Sudan until you were in your early 20s.
I grew up in Alexandria, actually.
Oh, no. All right. And so your father was?
Who was a collector. He was a small job in a company.
Yeah.
I didn't come from a rich family. I don't have really a nice romantic story that we have gone without or we did not have dinner. We were okay.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
but yeah, but I don't come definitely from a rich family. Or we have to struggle month by month to just make ends meet. And it's good, to know real life and real people.
So what was it like as a young Sudanese man growing up in Alexandria back in the 40s and 50s? I mean, this is in the middle of colonialism. This is in the middle of the struggles. I mean, how did that shape how you think about the world?
It was wonderful. I recall we were all very political. Every week we'll have a demonstration about Jomo Kenyatta arrest in Kenya, or about something happening in South Africa, or the students' body at that time was extremely political. We had great hopes. We started, to dream about what we're going to do with our independence. All these young countries were around. Nkrumah was around, talking about United Africa. We all dreamed of United Africa, and it is a missed opportunity that we have not moved quickly towards that. And but that's another issue, because I still believe in United Africa, United States of Africa, I hope someday. But that was the generation really of dream. You remember that was the time of the Beatles, the flower power, the student revolts. You remember students in Paris took over Paris? You remember that, the revolt, 68?
Yeah.
That when we were young people.
I mean, I don't remember, but I've read about it.
Well, your mother will remember that, yes.
I can ask her.
Sorry. So that was a great time of hope, really.
Yeah.
That was the time of the civil rights marches of Montgomery, Alabama, the dogs. One amazing picture I remember from that time was a very young American black girl has been admitted to a university in the South, and she had to go to university guarded by the National Guard. So you have this little young girl walking with a big tank driving behind her. And I thought that was an amazing picture.
Yeah. So these images inspired you as a young person. Yeah. And did they have any impact on the career path that you decided to take, or what would have been the most impactful thing? I mean, why did you decide, in a sense, to become an engineer?
I love engineering. I always loved math, engineering, science, and I thought it's a transformative power for us. We need to build this place. We need engineers. We need technicians. And that was. In my wall, I had the picture of Einstein next to Che Guevara. That what inspired us at that sort of age. Che Guevara was the symbol of revolutionary who willing to put his life, and he was a great hero of our generation. I recall he spoke to us at the University in Alexandria.
Oh, really?
Before he went to Congo.
Wow.
Yeah. And Einstein was this wonderful mind.
Yeah.
Science, the how to understand what's going around us. This is the kind of things that inspired us as young people. I know you guys changed a lot. I mean, your heroes now probably are Madonna and and footballers and God knows what. But that was our dream at the time.
So you have Einstein on one hand, you have Che Guevara on the other hand. Two, I guess, in some senses, two poles, but I guess Che Guevara was also a doctor, wasn't he?
Who?
Guevara was a doctor.
Guevara was a doctor, comes from middle class family,
right.
And he decided that he wanted to fight for justice, and he went and did what he do in Cuba, and then he tried to go and do the same in Africa and in Bolivia or other places. But it was seen as somebody who was willing to. I mean, he became a minister in Cuba.
Yeah.
Became a leader after. But he left all that to go again and put his khakis to go and fight whatever he believed in. So regardless if you share his beliefs or not, you cannot but admire somebody who is just putting his life on the line and doing what he's saying. I remember in his speech, he said something very interesting. When somebody asked him, Same question, not ethical leadership. I said, who is the leader?
Yeah.
And he said the leader is the last to eat, the last to sleep, but the first to die.
All right, so who out here is ready for that?
That's interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how somebody defines leadership.
But I mean, you bring up a good point. So the last to eat, the last to sleep, and the first to die. I mean, you have to be ready to put yourself on the line for your people.
And leadership is not about privilege. You know, that's a question for many of our leaders.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's not about privilege. So I'm also interested, because you said before that your father has been a great influence, and he was, in a sense, one of the people who made you the plain-speaking, outspoken man that you are today. Can you tell us a little bit about your father or your mother and what they were like and how they influenced your sense of what's right and what's wrong?
Yeah, I come from a Nubian extraction. I don't know if you know, Nubia is an area that straddles Egypt and Sudan. It's a very old race. We claim we are the real pharaohs in a way. The Egyptians don't agree with that, but that's another issue. But we have more pyramids than all of Egypt, actually. So it's a small race of people, thousands of years. We have a very deep-seated cultures, sets of cultures and belief. For example, I mean, women are honored in our culture. Even, you know, contrary to some of the countries around us, the name of the woman is not considered a problem, your height. It's very interesting. Some people think even the name of the woman should not be mentioned because it is scandalous. Should be actually you can be called after your mother. You know, so you could be, you could be called son of Ngozi.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Ngozi is my mom's name, for those of you who don't know.
And when you introduce yourself to people, to say, "Oh, I'm Ngozi's son,"
Yeah.
you know, which in some other cultures it is no, you don't say that.
Yeah.
You know, it is so it honors women. It is a very collective culture. You don't sleep if your neighbor is hungry. You have to share everything with the people around you. So there is some nice elements of that culture of people. Humility. People are not valued because of what they have, but how they behave in the community. So the community leadership among the Nubian is not the richest people who become the leaders. It's the people who are most respected, and they are almost respected because of their commitment to the community.
Right.
And this is wonderful things we should learn from our past, I think.
Right, and so this is what you brought with you.
It helps, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Right. So now we've moved from Alexandria, where you grew up, you decide to study engineering, and you decide to study electrical engineering, and then you moved to
telecommunications engineering.
Telecommunications engineering. Then you moved to the UK for your PhD in mobile communications. And you've said before that you really wanted to be an academic, and somehow you ended up a businessman. Let's talk a little bit about that journey, because I think it is really important to understand how you get from one place to the other, and then especially how that then converts into what you do now, which is really promoting a different kind of leadership on the continent. So what got you into mobile communications? What made you want to do a PhD?
Why I went to the mobile communications is very interesting. I'm a telecom engineer, and I was doing a period at the ITU, the International Telecommunication Union in Geneva. And that was part of my training as a young engineer. And I recall there was a movie called Khartoum. I don't know if you heard about this movie. Sir Laurence Olivier, a famous movie about General Gordon and Sudan, etc.
That might be before our time, but
it is a great movie.
But we're with you, though. We're with you.
And I really wanted to catch that movie because in Geneva, I don't speak French, and the movies are shown in French, but one day they're shown in an English version. So that was the day you're going to show the English version. And so I had to rush quickly to go and catch the movie. So as a student, of course, I always used buses. So that day, I decided I'm going to have a taxi because I have no time. So I got in this nice taxi. I remember it was a big Renault. And when I got in the taxi, the driver was talking on his radio. And the first time I see a driver talking in his radio, you know, this is the old radio systems. And that was 1970, I think, long time ago. And this stuff you guys have all in your hands is a very new things. I mean, this didn't exist at this time, okay? And so I was really intrigued by that, asking you how you communicate with your base, because we're all used to line of sight communication where the one aerial sees the other aerial, whether it's satellites, microwave, or whatever, direct line of sight you have to establish. And there's no line of sight here because this car going in the streets.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't know. I mean, I just gave me this and said you to speak on it. So when I went back to the office next morning, I asked my supervisor at the time, I said, you know, I saw this and this. Who here understand about this? He said, oh, there's a professor from Czechoslovakia. He's the only guy who had a little bit of idea about mobile communications. So I arranged me to meet with him and had lunch with him. I said, what's going on? He said, actually, we don't know. There is no way to mathematically model this. It's done by trial and error.
Really?
Yeah, they just go, we go to a point, high point, we put an aerial, and we push radio waves towards the city, and some areas get coverage, some doesn't.
Yeah.
But that's how it is done. I became very intrigued, and that's why I chose to work that. And actually my work, my thesis was about radio wave propagation in urban areas,
Right.
how to model. And that became basis then for the work of designing cellular networks, which came later in the 80s, of how to design cellular networks to provide coverage
So
and performance of
your graduate work, what you're telling us is that your graduate work literally changed the world.
Well, it helped because it's a lot of people. all technical stuff is a lot of people work to do things and we feed in each other. But that was my specialty. That's why when the British government gave license to British Telecom to introduce first cellular network in UK, they asked me to leave university, to join them. Okay. So I went to BT as a technical director. I designed the first cellular network in UK, actually, in '83.
Wow.
And so I went on actual application in building mobile networks, and that was the '83.
So this was 1983. So you stepped out of graduate school to work with British Telecom, but then you still went back to get your PhD.
No, I finished my PhD already.
First, and then
I finished my PhD. I was a senior research fellow at the university. I will continue my research work in this area of cellular, how to make it work.
Yeah.
Then I went to BT because as an engineer, look, we're like kids. We love train sets, to play with the train set.
Yeah.
And suddenly from your laboratory, you're asked to play with a huge train set to cover the whole of UK.
Yeah.
You cannot say no to that.
No, you can't.
That's a beautiful opportunity, and it's a great fun.
Yeah.
So that's how I moved from academia to industry.
Right.
I went as an employee of British Telecom to do that.
Right. And what was it like moving to the United Kingdom at that time? You're a Sudanese man who's left Egypt, who's left Sudan, who's left Egypt, and you come to the United Kingdom in the 1980s, in the early 1980s. This is the time of Margaret Thatcher. The United Kingdom is not exactly, I would say, well, now it's not, and back then it wasn't exactly the most welcoming place to certain kinds of people. I mean, what was it like to set up and work at that level?
Few things. I mean, first, I was astounded at the university how I was in the 60s in university before in Egypt to do my first degree there. Then 70s and 80s, I lived at universities in UK. And I was surprised how things have changed. In the 60s, universities were very political. Very political. Every day there is a rally. Every day there is occupation of the administration or a big debate about this or about that. At Birmingham University, where I spent a lot of time, actually, everybody was talking about their career. What's he going to do after the university? Suddenly, we moved from romanticism to materialism. And, you know, no discussion of politics or anything. I mean, it's just science and jobs. I'm going to go to the city. I'm going to do this, start a company. It was a different atmosphere completely from what I used to in Africa. So that's one remark. Things moved in the other direction after the upheaval of '68 into more conservative and, you know, let us do business, let's make money.
And so you started making money.
Not immediately.
Not immediately.
Not immediately, yes. But I had a great time to really design these networks at BT, etc. And until I get disillusioned with BT and decided to go out and do my own thing.
Yeah. So I know that we have a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience. Actually, how many of you guys are entrepreneurs out here? So pretty much everyone. I don't even know why I asked that question. So, you know, and we've talked a little bit before about this two things. One is the move to start your own thing, and what it's like to step out of the safety of, say, somebody else's structure into your own. I know that when you started Celltel, you said that it was a really difficult situation, that raising the money to even build out the networks was a problem. What was the, I mean, besides money, what was the greatest challenge? Because money is one thing, it's solvable sometimes. But there are other issues, I think, that crop up when you step out on your own and really take a leadership initiative.
There are two phases in my life, and I'll be very frank with you, and I know that may shock some people. I never wanted to be a businessman, okay? I never wanted that. I love engineering. I just want to do my engineering stuff, design best networks, do whatever. And a great shock I had in BT was how inefficient the system there. And we managed to build an amazing network, the first handheld network in the world we did in London, actually, and that is showbiz, everybody. And I was invited to Japan to help design the Japanese network at the time, because we did some interesting, innovative stuff. But the problem with BT, I found, is a total failure of the management of BT to understand the importance of mobile communications. BT is a huge company, and so cellular as a small little thing on the side. And I recall that the chief executive, chairman of BT, never came to the cellular company, his own company, for 6 years. First time he came was actually the week I was leaving.
Oh, really?
Yes, because I had enough, and I said, look, you guys don't understand what's the future of this. So those issues there about it's interesting, this small little thing came up later on to swallow the whole company.
Yeah.
But that's something else. It shows the failure of management of how to understand changing times and the change. You know, this is a paradigm shift. So I got really fed up with how, and I said, look, I mean, I don't want to work for a big company anymore.
Yeah.
I want to do my own thing. So what do you do when I was a technical director? I had a wonderful job. I had a big car. I had a secretary. I had this. I had that. So what do you do when you chuck this out? You say, okay, I'm going to work as a consultant.
Yeah.
That's what you usually do. So I say, okay, I'm going to work as a consultant. But then I found that I don't have the time, because immediately I got a contract from Japan, I got from Sweden, I got from Japan. So I found that I cannot handle this physically. So I needed to have a group of people with me. That's why I started my first company, which we designed probably half of all of Europe networks, mobile networks. It's called MSI.
What were you doing in your 30s?
That's the first company I started, and we did Singapore, we did Hong Kong, we did Shanghai, we did most. Then we in the United States. I ended up with 400 engineers working for me in the United States, doing networks, etc. So over time we found we are the largest independent technical house in Europe, actually.
Yeah.
And I never intended or planned that. All I wanted is just not to do my own thing. I don't want to work for BT anymore. I just want to do my own thing. And this grew, and it became the top consultant in the world. I mean, we did the German networks, we did the French network, the Swedish network, the Norwegian network. So we did most of these networks we take a 10-key contract and we go and do it.
And then you step out and go do another one.
we designed the network and we had it over. And so that was the first phase. So it was not a planned process, but it happened.
Right.
And I had to learn while doing it how to move from a technical person to a manager.
Right.
Which is totally different, because I was, at some stage I've been told, please, because I'll try to go to Oslo and say, oh, no, this base station should be here, this should be, and people say, please, stay out of it, you are the boss, you are not the engineer.
So
and you have to learn how to move.
So for those of us in the audience who are maybe making that transition or learning about what it means to be a technical person versus the person who inspires people, what would you say is that? What's the difference? What's the biggest thing that you need to be aware of?
I think few things you need to do. First, you need to understand your limitation. Never become a big head. Don't think because you are successful in something, you're going to be successful in everything, that you know everything. You don't. Nobody does. But you need to know what you lack. So when I started this, I never had business training. I never been to a business school. I didn't know how to read the financials, okay, or even to do a business plan. I didn't know anything of that. But I knew I don't know, and that helps. So you need to get help. So I need to ask a lawyer how to draw a contract, even a contract of employment. I need to ask how to design, a balance sheet. So I need to learn that, how it is done. And so you need to learn, and don't ever say or be ashamed of saying, I don't know. This is a problem of, as I grew up and I worked in more, and I end up with huge companies, I noticed any failures we have, it has always been because the executive was too shy to say he didn't know. That's always behind any failure. You need to know, stand up and say, sorry, I don't know. Tell me, teach me. What is this? Then you make the right decision. Right. So, and you need to have an open door to get people to criticize. Anybody in the company is allowed to criticize me.
Yeah.
We have town halls, and people can stand and say, no, why are we doing this? We should be doing this. And you listen to everybody. So I had to learn with people, and you need to have enough confidence to stand up in front of people and say, okay, teach me. What is this? Why are we doing this? Why don't we do that? So that's what we did with MSI. Second things I did, I made every employee in the company a shareholder.
From the beginning?
From the beginning. Everybody in the company is a shareholder. And maybe because I'm a bit of a socialist also, I believe...
Who would have thought?
Yeah, okay. If Javara was my hero as a young man,
right.
I should not forget that.
Yeah.
But honestly, I believe that the creation of value is created by everybody. There's no superhuman being who comes out of nowhere and create the whole value and take all the benefits for himself. If I have a company, everybody in the company is part of the team. Everybody is helping in developing this company. So we must all share in the good and the bad. That's how we do it. So when we ended up, 35% of the shares was the hand of the employees. And then there's myself, there's the investors, there's the management, separate from that.
Yeah.
But that way you have a team of dedicated people. You have the best, of course.
Right.
Attract the best people. And then you have the dedication of people. And there's nothing like that.
Yeah.
So when you succeed, we all succeeded.
Yeah.
And everybody's fine. In this first company, we created 50 millionaires.
Wow.
It was great. And,
Wow.
you know, it's wonderful. In Celtel, after that, we did hundreds of millionaires.
Yeah.
Because everybody else is a shareholder in the company. And I succeed because I did that. Do you understand? By giving shares, actually make more money.
Yeah.
So be smart. Okay?
Right.
You are not giving from your pocket.
Yeah.
It is their sweat, it's their know-how, their knowledge, which moving the company forward. So anyway, that's what,
So
yeah.
a real focus then on, first of all, knowing what your limitations are, and second of all, really realizing and understanding the power of other people, or the power of teamwork. I guess you guys, you heard it here first. Probably not first, but you've heard it here again. So write that down. And so in all of this, you know, you're moving through, you've had all these huge positions. Was there ever any time where you felt any doubt in yourself, where you felt like you maybe couldn't do this?
For the first company, we didn't have any doubt because we were the top. We had the most complicated jobs in our field.
Yeah.
And actually, we charging double of any nearest consultancy to us.
Yeah.
Okay, well, in that kind of situation, so I have no problem because we have the know-how.
Yeah.
And it's extremely valuable.
Yeah.
So we didn't have a problem. We have been profitable from there. Before we started, we immediately became profitable. When you have know-how, which is badly needed,
Right.
you can charge anything.
Right.
Frankly, you know, if somebody building a network costing $2 billion, and they come to you and say, okay, I can save you 30% of that and produce a better network. How much money you pay for that?
Yeah. Right.
Okay? So that was the argument we deal with. It's not like a charge you per hour or per...
Yeah.
Okay, so, but then you have to maintain your level of delivery, as I said. So I didn't have a problem. The problem was when we decided to go and do Africa.
Yeah.
Because we noticed we building networks everywhere, except in Africa.
Yeah.
Nobody came to us and say, please, can you help us in building a network in Africa? Because all the big companies shunned Africa. Nobody wanted to come and do things in Africa. At that time, Cable and Wireless came and Vodafone to do South Africa here.
Yeah.
I recall that time we licensed our software to help them do the networks here, but we did not go physically. But that was the only country which started, and that actually doing the changing times here after the independence in this country. But in the rest of Africa, there's nothing.
Yeah.
And people were too shy to come and build networks in Africa. Because they say, oh, Africa is not stable, military coups, dictatorships, why, you know, it's trouble.
Yeah.
We have to pay bribes, we have to do this. And we don't think Africa is that bad. That's why we decided to go and build mobile networks in Africa.
Yeah.
So that changed from a consultancy to a network operator.
Yeah.
So effectively became like Vodacom or you know, whoever. And, but to do that, it requires financing, a lot of money to build a network. It costs a lot. And in any mobile companies, you are leveraged by around 50%. So if I raise, let's say, $1 billion, I need a $1 billion from the bank to spend in building a $2 billion network.
Right.
Example. And that's how any telecom company in the world works. Not in Africa. Because banks will not give us money.
Yeah.
Because nobody will lend us at that time any money to build anything in Africa. So we had to finance everything by equity. We're the only telecom company in the world who is completely financed by equity. So that's a huge pressure on us.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the network is expanding. It's huge growth because it became a great success.
Right.
We're building 14 countries in Africa.
Right.
And imagine the pressure on us. We have to keep raising funds every 6 months.
Just
You
to
know,
make it
every
work.
penny I had, everything we had, you know, we just try to feed that beast, you know.
Yeah.
It's extremely profitable. But we did not take a single dollar from any operation because we had to keep growing the company. And that was really tough for us.
Yeah. How did you deal with the stress?
Well, it is actually, we were lucky in a way. I had the support of major, what you call the international development institution. So people like CDC, like IFC, the World Bank, FMO from Holland, the Germans, the Americans, the OPEC.
Yeah.
So we had about all those people bought maybe 20% of the capital of the company. We had to fund it mainly ourselves. Later on, some private equity, 2 or 3 courageous one came to us. But that was so tight. And we were going to list the company, actually. We were making a revenue of over $1 billion a year.
Wow.
Revenue. That's our... but we have to spend a lot of money to build
To make
the
that
company.
money, yeah.
Our profit margin was great.
Yeah.
But because we are growing, either we stop growth, and then we have a lot of dividends, a lot of cash out, but that's not the way to do business.
Yeah.
We have to continue to do that. And we were listing the company, and that would have improved our ability to borrow. And unfortunately then, unfortunately, we had a number of people then bidding for the company.
Yeah.
And the company was sold in we sold it in 2004.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. The company was sold initially to a Kuwaiti operator.
Yeah.
Who paid $3.4 billion for the company.
Yeah.
They didn't have the full money. They went to UBS, borrowed $2.4 billion from them, using the company assets as a collateral to build. And we asked, how come you guys managed to borrow 2.4 from the same banks which refused to give us?
Right.
They said, oh, because we are Kuwaiti. But the underlying asset is Celtel, the same. So how that is different?
Yeah.
This just shows how stupid bankers are. And no, this is true. And I said that to them because I was still chairman of the company.
Yeah.
And they were closing the deal, and now they had all the bankers when you close, you know.
Yeah.
And I told them, frankly, I'm sorry about the language, but I told them, you are assholes. Because it's the same company which last month you refused to give $100 million in loan to the company. You're paying $2.5 billion backed by the same asset.
Yeah.
So what is the rationale? You are the same guys, you know, spending, you know, backing, you know, the real estate, all the subprime lending in U.S., which any sane person would not do.
Right.
You support, you understand about subprime, of course. You know, you give somebody 120% loan of the asset because he's not credit worthy.
Yeah.
That's why you call it subprime. He has no income. How is guy? And then you charge him a lot more in interest. Right. And how we can obey this guy? You know, if you have no income.
Right.
And you give him, and then you package that and go and sell it to some stupid other guy. That is the financial crisis. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in my view, it is some stupid, arrogant bankers were running the system with only self-interest of how to make money without even thinking what they're doing to the international economy. But of course, things are changing now.
Yeah.
But in our times, people will not touch Africa.
Yeah.
You know, we were a successful company. We have margins over 40%.
Yeah.
Extremely, every operation was profitable.
Yeah.
And it still will not be financed because we are African.
Wow.
That is is a very interesting point for people to remember, how people's attitude was towards Africa.
Right. So you then, after you sold the company, stepped out and decided to turn your energy towards changing that attitude. And I think one of the things you said was that, as you mentioned earlier, that the real crisis was in leadership. One of the reasons people wouldn't touch Africa was because of the leadership they saw. Hence the Mo Ibrahim Foundation and the emphasis on governance. Now, we've talked about it before as well. I think, I've asked you questions about the efficacy of giving out a cash prize to leaders, whether that really works, and whether, when you have a situation where somebody has, not just money, but like GDP at their fingertips, and you're going to give how much per year, an annuity of, say, $200,000 a year for the next 10 years. If I'm the president of such and such, I'm like $200,000 versus GDP. There's a big difference there.
Yeah, but this is not our guy. The guy who's going to steal millions is not our guy. We're not interested in these guys.
Yeah.
We're interested in the guys who come and serve, walk out with clean hands, and no blood, no dirty money, at the same time move the country forward. I think those are heroes. The problem, you know what? There is this bad perception about Africa. I was speaking at London School of Economics. If you know that, in London, it's one of the great schools.
Yeah.
And I was talking to the postgraduate students there, and we talk about leadership. And I just happened to be, and I asked people, how many of you know Mobutu? Can you raise your hand? Everybody raised their hand. How many know, our friend Kabila? Everybody knows Kabila. Our neighbor here in Zimbabwe, everybody, everybody knows. Then I ask, how many people know Festus Mogai?
Yeah.
Festus who? How many people know Shisano? Nobody knows. How many people don't know our real heroes. They only know the criminals. And I said to them, how would you feel, you guys, if somebody asked me, who do you know of European leader? I say, oh, I know Mussolini, I know Hitler, I know Orban, I know, excuse me, you are painting the whole country, 54 country, by 5 or 6 dictators we have seen, or 10 dictators. You know those guys. Then our heroes, you don't know. Yeah. Nobody knows those guys. And our job, really, I think part of that's not all what we're doing, but part of what we're doing, we need to bring those heroes out of the shadows.
Yeah.
And at that date, London Business School, London
School
of Economics, those like 30% of the postgraduate people in the room anyway were Africans.
Yeah.
And I told them, shame on you, because you accepted the narrative given to you by other people, and you as Africans, you don't know your own good people. Yeah. You know your bad guys. It doesn't work like that. So we need to bring these people out of the shadows. Those should be what people. You are guys here because of Mandela. Mandela is a great man. I love him to bits. He's one of our laureates anyway.
Right.
But Mandela is not the only guy. There's some other guys did wonderful jobs as well. And why aren't we celebrating those people?
Right.
And none of those people who left the office had any money. Look, how many of you knows President Barias of Cape Verde? Honestly, raise your hand if you know this guy. you are a minister in the country, you know him. What about you guys? Honestly, any of you know Barias? You don't know. It takes only a minister of Cape Verde to know. Now, shall I again say to you, shame on you? Right? Now, Pedro Barias was one of the people, the freedom fighters for Cape Verde. They won their independence. And he became the leader of the country. And he come from a Marxist background, because the guerrilla fighters, that was the time when everybody was a Marxist around here. And they came out, and he became leader of the country. For some reason, he decided, I'm going to have a multi-party system. So, introduce multi-party systems. I'm going to liberalize the economy, and then I am going to have an election. Mind you, a very strange election, because he lost. And when I said, look, you guys, your liberation movement, take over the country. You guys stay in power forever. That was you do everywhere in Africa. How could you lead the liberation movement and you introduce election and you lose?
Yeah.
I mean, that's something unique. When he lost election, he called a taxi, took his wife and 2 kids, and go and to live with his mother in her apartment. So what kind of a leader is that? I was talking on his birthday, and I said, excuse me, you failed all of us. Did not you hear of Zuma? He built a $22 million house. You lose election, and you go and stay with your mother?
So let's...
Is that correct, what happened? I ask him. Okay, so that is the man. He go and live with his mother, but he has no place. Then, next election, he wins. And he become leader for 2 terms. Cape Verde is a small place in the middle of the water, somewhere west of Africa. They have no oil, no gas, no. In 10 years, this country moves from low-income countries, least developed countries, to middle-income countries. How do you do that? Think leadership. These are the heroes. Somebody come introduce democracy in your country and offer space for everybody, liberalize your economy, move the country forward. Do we need better heroes than that? That is what we need. Those are the people we need to honor. And you guys need to know about. You need to tell your kids about that.
Yeah.
Because this is the symbols we need to move forward. And that's part of our job, to try to bring from the shadows those people to say, hey, these are our heroes.
So let's talk about what is a hero, because the prize has been awarded, and let's say Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who we all know and love, but is not uncontroversial. So it's not, and I guess the question is then, I think we often will dismiss people because they're not perfect. But how do you then, when you're a leader in certain situations, you're going to have to make choices that will make you not perfect. How do you account for that?
Right. Let me just, for the sake of transparency, I'm not a member of the prize committee.
Right.
But that, again, part of good governance, because I should not have a voice in awarding this. There's an independent committee. Now, people are not looking for perfection. We are looking for leaders. No leader is perfect. But what we need to see in the big picture, and when the prize committee awarded the prize to Ellen, they said that clearly. She had some challenging issues there, but for the first time, we had a peaceful transfer of power in Liberia. Those guys never had peaceful transfer of power.
Yeah.
They had all these civil wars, all these atrocities, just to stabilize the country, to have this peaceful, transfer of power. That's great.
Yeah.
She did not steal any money from the country, no, and she did fight for women's rights, etc. That's interesting. To break the glass ceiling that women cannot be presidents of a country. This is the first woman president in Africa.
Yeah.
I think that in itself is something, because we want girls to dream. Yeah, they can make it. Here is somebody there who made it. That gives young girls courage also. You can do it.
Yeah.
So the number of positives there far outweigh any negative that we have seen. That's what the prize committee position,
right,
which I think was a wonderful position.
Right, to take. So let's transition a little bit and turn it out to you guys. I'm sure there are some questions that you have, and then we'll come back. So we'll take a couple of questions, and then we'll come back to hearing a little bit more wisdom. I will be very honest with you. If you do not ask a question, I will stop you in the middle. So no speeches, no pontifications. What's the question? I'm going to give you like 30 seconds before I start. Wow, that's a lot of questions. Why don't we start with back here, all the way back up there on the aisle. I'll get you, don't worry. And if you want to say your name first, and then go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, this is Mohammed Shaheen from Egypt. Here. Yeah, stand. Okay. Mohammed Shaheen from Egypt. So, talking about the leadership crisis, I will talk about my country, Egypt. We have Arab Spring, and now it's gone. Obviously, it's gone because of lake.
I'm gonna no pontificating. What's the question? Let's get to it real quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the reason was there was no good leaders to lead this great movement, and we lost our chance. So how we could prevent this from happening again? Although it was led by well-educated people like Wael Ghunaim, so I don't think it's a matter of education.
So
something else is missing.
So let me put that. Let me see if I can paraphrase that. So I guess the idea is, we've seen, and it's not just the Arab Spring, but let me extrapolate and say across the continent, you see young people stepping up and taking sort of a role in changing leadership. But sometimes it doesn't work. I guess in Egypt and across the Arab world, maybe it got hijacked. So what are the elements of that of a successful movement against, say, the older, maybe more corrupt or less effective leaders of the past? Does that kind of get, okay.
Right. In 2011, when you had the Arab Spring early on, as it happened, we had our board meeting at my foundation, because we have board meetings which move around. That's a board meeting. It was around May or June. We had it a little bit later, after the Arab Spring, before the election. And when we go and do our board meeting in a country, we always have a sort of town hall meeting. So I remember we invited about 40 or 50 people. Wael Ghunaim, all the leaders of all these kind of young movements around, editors of newspapers, some people from universities, etc., to have a discussion with our board. And the first question I asked them was, those guys sitting in Tahrir, because we're still sitting in Tahrir Square, okay? The revolution is finished. The military council is there and preparing for election. And those guys still sitting in Tahrir Square. Don't appoint this minister, put this, all these, but these are the issues they had. First question I asked, you have this election coming in few months. You guys sitting in Tahrir have 30 parties, 3-0. We're sitting in the room. Can you tell me what is the differences between your parties? You are all young people, you are all progressive, you are all democratic, you want all, a progressive Egypt. Why you have 30 parties trying to fight an election? Complete idiocy. Yeah? And those guys sitting in Tahrir Square shouting, Muslim Brotherhood going around Said, Bahari, this is the countryside, yeah? Giving away baskets of bread and oil, and cooking oil and food for people, asking them to swear on the Mus'haf, the Quran, to vote for them. Our friends sitting in Tahrir Square singing and shouting. Tahrir Square is not going to decide the election votes. 30 party fighting. I said, every one of you want to be a leader. None of you will be a leader. None of you will have one single seat in the parliament. And that is a problem. This is political idiocy. You have to know how to work with people. You need only one party for all those people. Not everybody want to be a leader. What is this? So it's a total failure because of lack of political experience of the people there. Everybody want to be somebody in his own terms. So none of them will be anybody. I'm really sorry about that.
Wow.
But that was the situation in Egypt, which I saw it myself.
So I'm going to go right here in the scarf. So if you stand up, say your name and then your question.
Thank you. My name is Tandiwe. My question is, what do you think is the greatest barrier to having reliable, consistent telecom systems across the African continent? Telecom system, reliable and consistent telecom systems. We have a great one. I live in a rural area and it reached us and I was able to do my defense online, but things have almost been downhill from there and I'm wondering what gives that.
If you use a mobile network in New York, you'll be lucky to live where you are. So I don't think the standard of telecommunication is the best developed part of infrastructure in Africa, to be honest. In Ouagadougou, you make better calls than you can make in Washington, D.C. I tried both, I know.
So we'll go right here in the front.
My name is Innocent Magambi. I like calling myself a professional refugee because what you talked about leadership affected me deeply, and that's my story.
Where are you from?
I'm from Burundi, but I'm based in Malawi. You talked about failure in leadership, and I agree, and we are all concerned about it and want to do something about it. However, there's the other side of the pressure that comes from outside of Africa that we should not ignore. For example...
So, Innocent, what's the...
Yes, the question is, Libya was hit hard, and people were promising better Libya. And you saw big forces that we did not have power to stop. But Libya is far from being, what we were promised. How can we, leaders, yes, challenge the current leadership, but also challenge that other pressure that is coming?
Look, I'm not exonerating anybody. I mean, the guys who came to do regime change in Iraq or do regime change in Libya, they just came and, the story of Humpty Dumpty, just broke it, and never put it back again. I mean, it's absolutely horrible. Shouldn't have been done. Would Iraq have been better under Saddam Hussein than it is now? Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. What we have now, what have we achieved in Iraq? What have we achieved in Libya? Would Libya have been better under Muammar Gaddafi? Absolutely yes. But what is happening now is terrible. So half-baked interventions by powers that be, please leave us alone, okay? Because they come and destroy, and then they say, oh, we are not into nation building. So why you come anyway? So it is really sad what happened there. And then they throw all these arms from the aeroplanes to everybody. The place is a huge dump of arms. So they had to end up with all these militias everywhere. And so I'm not exonerating those guys. But if I'm speaking in Berlin and I do that a lot, or in London or whatever, I'm going to raise these issues with European people. But I'm speaking in Africa now, so I need to focus on our role as Africans here. What the Libyan people are doing, why all these militias extracting money from the government, by force here and there. It's time there are only 5-6 million Libyan people. Supposed to be one of the richest countries in the world. It's a very rich country. We're only 5-6 million people. Why those people cannot, where is the leadership in Libya to just get people together as Libyan? Let's just come together and sort out this mess here. It's easy to do it. Why aren't they doing it? So I need to focus on us. It's our job we have to do our job first. Yes, other people make mistakes, do stupid things, etc. But we hope they stop doing that, and I hope they learn from their mistakes. But we should not ignorate our own people role in trying to take charge of our own countries.
So I want to quickly touch on something you said there, which is you said, would Libya have been a better country if Gaddafi were still there? You said absolutely, which brings us to something that you've talked about a little bit, which is what is then the best form of government to on the continent? I mean, we've talked about, and you've talked about. We had your the last governance weekend in Rwanda with Paul Kagame, who gets high marks from a lot of people for his effectiveness, but maybe also gets a lot of criticism for what people perceive as an autocratic system. We've talked about a couple other leaders. I guess in Ethiopia, they've had a similar situation. You can point to many people across the continent, and you've said, I think, before that it's not necessarily clear that democracy is the best form of leadership or governance. Do you care to comment on that? I'm gonna give you that.
To reduce governance to some kind of, if those people have every 4 years an election and people line up the streets and they go and they take something and then go home and then we have wonderful democracy in the country, that is nonsense. You know that. We have seen it happening everywhere. So this facade of a process takes place every 4 years. What happens before that? How clean is the vote register? How it's updated? Do people have same access to airtime, or how is the whole thing rigged or not? We had an election in Sudan. Omar Bashir won, I don't know how, 95, I don't know how much. It's something huge. He hasn't got the support in the country, but half of the register is fake. They won the election before it started. Before the election started, it's done. And did not need to beat anybody. So Carter goes to Sudan, and they see people queuing, and nobody's beating anybody. And then they say, oh, wonderful election. Actually, sorry. Because, they had to give a list of all the copy of the register of the voters to all the parties. And that's part of the process in Sudan. Yeah. 1 week before the election, I got a call from some of those parties. Say, oh, Mo, can you find us some software? Because they gave us the whole thing coded. We don't know how to open it. And they gave us the names. That's 1 week before the election. They should have given it 2 months before, and they gave it coded. And I said, sorry, I've noticed, I don't know. Well, how do you accept to go into election under this? 2 months ago, they did not give you the register. Then you say, okay, we're not playing. But you stay until one. That is, again, how we deal with this issue. We need to take a really issue. So just to go back to your question, in our index, we measure governance. I don't know if you are familiar with the index or not. Have a look at it. Because governance is measurable and can be defined. And governance is not about election. Much more than that. Governance is also about education. It's also about health, the quality of health, about rule of law, about safety of people, about management of public finance, about unemployment, about infrastructure being built. These are all elements of governance. Then democracy, we call it participation. We don't use the word democracy. We think it's abused because it reduced in people's mind to just this funny process of pretending we're having, this, you color your finger and that's stupid. Participation is during the whole, do participate in the life of the country at all levels. It's not just a general election, local elections, town halls meeting, whatever. Every citizen must be part of any decision making in the country. I mean, at all levels, because that's participation, what we call it participation. So when we measure all that, yes, Kagame may get a low point in this area. And he gets a low point there, But he get wonderful area points in infrastructure, in education, e-government, in all the stuff they are doing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really something, fighting corruption. I tell you something, a story. We had our meeting in Kigali last time. We have our annual meeting every year, moving around Africa from country to country. We had last meeting in April, our last meeting was in April in Kigali.
Yeah.
And a lot of people came to me. We have like 500 visitors. And then we have maybe 100, 200 local people. Conference about 800 people. 700. And a lot of people come to me with different stories. This American guy came to me and said, Mo, what's happening here? I said, what? He said, I came to the airport. I came late. And late at night, through the airport. And they said, okay, you have to pay so many dollars for the visa. Of course, before he landed the country, they tell you no plastic bags are allowed in the country. If you have a plastic bag, you make a fine.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And African countries concerned about environment more than most European countries.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then he said, I had to pay for the visa. My card did not work. So I said, no, I'll pay cash. He said, fine. So I paid cash and said, oh, we have a problem. We don't have change.
Yeah.
So I wait, don't go. He went and he brought a book and he wrote something there, I owe you. And it was something like €2 or something like $2, something like that. He stopped the guy, gave him this $2. He owes him, and he said, listen, you have to do this. When you come out, you keep this paper with you. You must come here to take this $2 back before you leave the country. This is very important for us. You have to take it back. And this guy to me said, my God, when I go to these places, this give me a little bit here, you pay bribe here. This guy insists on goes, gets a place. This is the level of people conscious, and that's wonderful. To fight corruption, to fight at all levels. And so he done a wonderful job. And we have to assess that with, yes, it will improve sometime in democracy. It's not perfect, but the other important things are good. You remember talking to Haile Mariam?
I did, yeah.
We had Haile Mariam in the conference also, the ex-prime minister of Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And when we asked him, he resigned, why he resigned, what happened. And one thing he said, for 15 years, we had the highest rate of development of Africa, 2-digit, not less than 10% every year. But you know what? People are hungry, but after they eat, then they ask, where is my rights? And that is very important point, very wise point. If you're starving, you don't care about your political rights. If your child is dying and you have, for malnutrition, is starving or whatever, you're not going to ask, oh, where are my political rights? Excuse me. So people have to be fed first, and that is the main concern. Of course, once people eat, where are my political rights?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we go. All right, let's go back to questions. All right, my man from Cape Verde.
Hi, Uncle Mo. Hi, Uzo.
Hi.
My name is Pedro Lopes. I'm from Cabo Verde. Yes, I'm the only one. I'm Secretary of State for Innovation and Technical Training. And I find it very sad that you have to spend your money to award politicians for good governance right now in 21st century in Africa. And I have a question, because you're a businessman, you're not a politician. How can we pass our culture? Because you said a very interesting thing, that is, when my neighbor doesn't eat, I cannot sleep. So how can we pass our culture as Africans to our corporate culture as businessmen?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't have an answer to this, to be honest. It's tough. Because the problem, we forgot where we are, who we are, where we come from. And if you look at most of our leaders, you'll find always that the second term is much worse than the first term. Always. Because our mind changes and we start to think we are indispensable. Everybody around me is saying to me, "You are a wonderful man. What a great leader you are. How can we live without you?" You know? And what you're saying is, we're going to lose our job without you. And no, but that's what happens. And so people change, unfortunately. Money changed people. Power changed people. The saying that power corrupts is absolutely right. How we change that, I don't know. More democracy, more activism, holding people accountable. We try to publish this index every year. I think people always talk about the prize. Again, there's something to do with money. People are interested in the prize much more than the index. The index is much more complicated and expensive and costly to do, very hard to do. But people still think of the prize. The index is great because we measure the performance. We measure 100 parameters in every country every year, and we publish it. Why? Because we want the government, we want accountability. So the citizens of the country can have something simple to hold the accountable. How come you only did this in education? You scored X. Your neighbor scored X plus 5. You scored. Why did you do this? So I think by increasing, and frankly, we have a much easier job now because of the spread of social media. And the knowledge. When I grew up, there is no internet, no social media, no the state television, one channel only run by the government. We don't have access to anything else. They send some newspapers coming in. You don't see only the papers you like. So there is a whole clamp of information. Each African country used to have what they call Minister of Information. And these guys control the radio and television. And actually, many of them still have them. Minister of Information. These ministers of thought, they need to ensure we only see and hear what the government wants us to hear. All that is gone. You guys can watch any TV channel, you can read any blog, you can do. So we can hold people accountable much easier now. So I think it should be an easier job now.
All right, so I'm going to go over to this side and all the way in the back up here. Since everybody has a question, please don't stone me.
Good morning. My name is Tulile from South Africa. My question is, using yourself as an example of a person that was an academic and that has been able to contribute so immensely from the research that they did, how do we convince academics to actually translate their research so that it makes a contribution and creates value and contributes to poverty eradication and job employment or job creation and so on? How do we do that? Because as you said initially, you didn't really want to go into business, and that's not uncommon for academics to do. How do we change that?
Again, I don't know how to change that, to be honest. I assume that every citizen, in whatever field they are doing, they ought to be responsible people. I don't see politics as a field. Somebody's job is a politician. No, I think all are politicians. Politician in the sense that we are all interested in politics. We all need to have a stand in what's going on around us. And politics is much more than the high-level politics. It's all about what happens in our neighborhood, what happens everywhere. And we need to contribute to that. And there's no value for an academic work which has some implication for the way we do things or we move forward. That's why people are fighting very hard against this concept of ivory towers or totally independent. I think that's became an old fashion. More and more people are. And actually, if you look at the economics of the research, most of the research work at universities is funded actually by companies, by businesses. And that ensures that all this, most of research, etc., is really linked to real life. Because otherwise, there's no value for research which is not linked for actual life. Yes, some pure research also is needed, and that's government usually funded. And that's also interesting.
So we'll take one last question, and I've done this side of the room, right here in the middle, blue scarf. Sorry, guys.
Hi, my name is Rasha. I'm from Tunisia. Thank you for all the precious information you're giving us. I have a question about the youth. So in Tunisia, we have amazing youth capacity. We have amazing youth generation that is really working on change, but we are not having the chance to actually take important positions. Our president is 91 years old, and he's barely capable of speaking properly in the media. So we're very, very shocked with the reality. I just wanted to ask you, how can we get into the important positions to actually take the country in our hands? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, Tunisia is a very interesting country. Actually, we had our annual meeting 3 years ago in Tunisia, I believe. You actually had the most successful Arab Spring, actually. So in a way, we are fortunate. But you have done that because I think you have the highest percentage of educated people in the Arab world. And illiteracy is almost zero in your country, which shows also the relationship between education and political awareness, etc. What you have as a problem really is economic stagnation. And that's a problem. Jobs is a real problem of young people. When I came to your country many years ago, that was a problem under the previous regime. When I came, again, I talked to the people, they say, again, the same problem is jobs. How to create jobs. And sometimes the danger of being very political active, that we end up with a problem of Tahrir Square, which is too many elites talking among themselves and arguing about really some not substantial issues, when the main job really how we're going to sort the economy out now. And that I think what people do. I really worry about how we achieve economic development in Tunisia. There's a lot of goodwill towards your country. Many people want to help. European Union want to help other people to really move the country forward. But you need to come with a plan. Where jobs will come from? I remember I went to Tunisia a few years ago, and I went to one of the resorts. All the hotels were empty. All the hotels were empty. We have an amazing number of hotels empty. And the people working there, no jobs. So somehow we really need to focus on the economy, I think.
So we're going to have to close it off there. I know there are many more questions, and I promise you, I'm going to promise on Mo's behalf that he'll answer every single one of them for you, if you track him down and find him. But I wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much, Mo, for taking the time to chat with us and to share your wisdom and your experience with us. Thank you to the Obama Foundation for having us here. And then most of all, thank you guys to all of you for your attention and your insights and your questions. Clap for yourselves. As we say in Nigeria, clap for yourself. But it's really important that we have these kinds of dialogues, and it's really important that we get the chance to spend an hour and a half talking about the future of us, essentially. So thank you very much, Mo. Thank you, everybody, and you guys can be on your merry ways.